Julio Jones has announced his retirement from the NFL, and that gives me an opportunity to tell you just how important Julio Jones was, not just to Alabama football, but to college football as a rule. And there is a great argument for Julio Jones being the most influential player in the 21st century. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. We talk college football year round. If that is something that you're into, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and leave a comment below answering this question. Do you think Julio Jones is the most important player of the 21st century, if not the most important player at the University of Alabama in its history? And the way that I draw this out is to take a look at Alabama before 2008 and after 2008. One of the more staggering statistics to reference here among a huge trove of statistics around Julio Jones is that before he was a first-round draft pick in the NFL, the last Alabama receiver to be a first-round draft pick was Ozzie Newsome in 1978. Ozzie Newsome had become a general manager by 1996, which is still 12 years before Julio Jones enters the University of Alabama, which is wild for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that's how far back you had to go before you could talk about Alabama making these players. I mean, we could talk about Gene Stallings and when he was able to do it for a short time there in the early 1990s, right as the SEC is joining the television revolution. But I tend to look at Julio Jones as being the first guy to really buy into what Nick Saban was selling at Alabama, along with, by the way, recruiting coordinator Curt Cignetti, who was instrumental in not just getting him, but Mark Ingram, Dante Hightower, others of that class to join in. Remember, Nick Saban had done this once before at LSU, but there was a stop at the Miami Dolphins in between. And there were a lot of people that wanted to know just how important it was for Nick Saban to be a college football coach and at a sleeping giant that is the University of Alabama. One of the things that he did at LSU, he did at Alabama, which I love, right? He looked around regionally and said, who is in my backyard? Oh, that guy, those players. He did this with Mark Spears at LSU. He did this with Julio Jones in the state of Alabama, which also led to the rise of even more important players from the state of Alabama. Jameis Winston comes to mind. So does TJ Yeldon. Keep going down the line on this, and you'll keep Bo Scarborough. You'll get to players. You'll get to dudes that just the state of Alabama just produces. The other argument here is that after Julio Jones not only showed up to Alabama, but they threw him the damn ball, you got to see more influential wide receivers coming to the University of Alabama as the game was changing into one where you couldn't play murder football the way that Nick Saban always wanted to play by 2012. After Johnny Manziel basically ran around his defense, he had to change up. He had to go get a quarterback that can move. This is how Blake Sims goes from being basically a running back or safety to your starting quarterback. He also needed to modernize the game in as far as we're going to spread the field too. I need to have dudes on the outside that can beat man-to-man, can beat press, and can get themselves open, as well as guys that can feed them the football. So we get to see Amari Cooper, who becomes a one-man band right as he's leaving and enters this guy named Derrick Henry, where they get back to the one-man band. And then we get to 2017, which is just wild. Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. Guys that absolutely positively can play at every level, right? I'd also make the argument here that Julio Jones was a great football player, but according to others, he was a better basketball player. DeMarcus Cousins, Boogie Cousins, would tell you straight up and down, y'all ain't seen Julio hoop. If you saw Julio hoop, you'd be making the same discussion right now. The guy that this mostly reminds me of, a guy that can change the entire trajectory of a program for decades to come, Travis Hunter at Colorado. It's that sort of pull. For the youngsters that weren't around for 2008 and sounds like old man RJ is talking to you about some stuff that happened eons ago, that's the comp here. Travis Hunter at Colorado is what it meant for Julio Jones to be at Alabama. It was the first start of not only are we going to build a dynasty here, But we're going to have Heisman winners. Mark Ingram. We hadn't had a bunch of those at Alabama. We're going to have first-round draft picks at quarterback. We're going to have first-round draft picks on the offensive line, on the defensive line, at the secondary positions, all over the field. We could sit on a guy like O.J. Mayo until a national championship game pops up, and then, O.J. Mayo, excuse me. We could sit on him, and we could go, hey, we're just going to throw a tight end to football now. Y'all understand? You got it? O.J. Mayo, USC. My bad. I'm also popping in and out of my brain with Reggie Bush and Cam Newton as I'm trying to get to this point where people understand. Like, Reggie Bush is probably the most exciting player of the 21st century. You could say he's important, mostly because they took his Heisman away and then they gave it back. That's not an NCAA decision, by the way. That was a Heisman Trust decision. NCAA ain't got nothing to do with the Heisman Trophy or Reggie Bush getting it or keeping it. And then USC choosing to get rid of it too. That's on them as well. I can make an argument that Cam Newton is the best player to ever play college football because you can't name nobody else on that Auburn team, and yet they won the national friggin' championship, which means they had to get past Alabama in one way, shape, or form during this heyday of the Julio Jones era, right? Cam Newton be doing all kinds of stuff on his podcast, but that man is a monster at Auburn. A monster. I absolutely will go to the mat every single time to say he's the best player to ever play college football for what he was able to do. Julio Jones, though, changed the trajectory of Alabama for decades. Right now, we're talking about Alabama going 9-4 with a loss to Oklahoma, a Vanderbilt, a couple other places they probably shouldn't have lost, but also a win against a number one ranked Georgia team that ended up playing the college football playoff, winning the SEC championship, being a down year. We're talking about Alabama quarterback might get drafted in the second round, right? We're talking about Alabama also getting Ryan Williams in large part because of what Julio Jones showed you could do for the Crimson Tide at wide receiver. And they did that. A true freshman ended up beating Georgia. If he doesn't have that 75-yard touchdown, we're not talking about it. That's who Julio Jones is. I also wanted to throw Travis Hunter in this headline because it's important that you understand the gravity here. Julio Jones is a college football Hall of Famer. He will be a pro football Hall of Famer. The man averaged 1,000 yards receiving for his entire career. I really wish he'd got to play on better football teams for a longer amount of time because in the back of my head, I was going, what if Randy Moss, what if Julio Jones at the Patriots with Tom Brady? Just two dudes where Tom Brady could just step back and unload the football and know those guys were going to run underneath it. Two guys that could take the top off the football, take the top off the defense. Two guys that were never going to be beaten in a foot race or high point. Just Megatron comes to mind, right? Calvin Johnson. That is what we're dealing with. We're going to come up with a good nickname for Travis Hunter at some point because it sounds too much like Travis Scott now, which, might have its own cachet. Talk about sicko mode. But that's the guy. That's why I wanted to do this segment is I keep thinking about Nick Saban saying, I'm going back to college because in the NFL, I only get one first round draft pick if my GM hasn't traded it away already. In college, I can get 25 in 1 year, every year. And he kept doing that. And Julio Jones was the first guy that he had to convince to stay. I mean, remember at the time, Florida, Ohio State, Oklahoma, those teams are playing for championships, right? Texas, those teams are playing for championships. Alabama still need to prove some stuff by the time that Julio got there. But the way in which one player can fundamentally change not just the trajectory of your season, but the trajectory of your program, that's why we're doing this segment. Julio Jones, man, I hope they put him in the Legends College Football 26 right now because he ought to be one of the most coveted players of all time because he is one of the greatest players of all time.